Now I would like to go a little deeper into understanding culture. Yeah, so we have defined. Now I would like to discuss with you what are the different ways to understand culture, the different perspectives. Then what are different levels of culture? Yeah, and here I refer to national culture, German culture, or Bavarian culture, or maybe even student culture. Yeah, there are different types of cultures, or organizational culture. And then we also would like to talk about some cultural differences and what influence they have beyond what we've discussed so far. So to understand culture, there are many ways of how to comprehend them. Here is just one way, distinguished into three different perspectives. Yeah, on the one hand, we have the functionalist perspective, then the constructivist perspective, and some kind of integrative approach. So I will discuss them now in a bit more detail. So first, we have the functionalist perspective that views culture more as a nation state. So we have German culture, we have French culture, and so forth. Yeah, and it's also assumed to be fairly stable. Germany always same culture, and over time there's very little change. It's very constant, and it's also fixed. Yeah, it's Germany or it's France, and you try really to tie it down there. That has the advantage you can easily compare France versus Germany versus Japan, you name it, and so forth. Then I think on the opposite side would be the constructivist approach or perspective. Here we do not assume anymore it's static, it's the opposite, it's dynamic, it's constantly evolving. It's not only based or only determined by national borders, but it's based on interactions. We're constantly evolving. There could be interactions between nations, communication, or travel between people, or individual interactions. Yeah, and constantly all these interactions between nations, between organizations, between individuals, they all result in some kind of change. And also it's a matter of perspective, how this side perceives the other side. And that also implies we cannot measure culture. It's all constructed. It's in the eyes of the beholder. You consider culture this way, and maybe she and that way, and he again, and so forth. It's all kind of moving. It's constantly moving, and you have to interpret it through different lenses. That would be probably some of the basic idea. So constant interaction and individual perspectives. So we have these two extremes. One is very rigid. We can put numbers on it, and the other one is all perceived and changing. Probably the truth lies somewhere in between, neither this nor that, or maybe there might be some aspects very valuable in both of these perspectives, and that leads then to some sort of integrative approach, trying to combine some of these aspects. More some kind of balanced understanding of culture, both considering there's certain entities such as maybe nation states, and at the same time there's also change taking place. Change taking place, I think just one example would be here. In general, I think the principle is, as we discussed before, culture has an influence, or influence on organization. One such major change we have seen recently, COVID-19. COVID-19 pandemic, and that has also some kind of somewhat even universal consequences for many countries around the globe. If you think of a business context, I think yesterday we also had a discussion, one of you also told me, yeah, we have COVID-19 and now everyone does virtual work. And it's not just global virtual work, and it's really now has become commonly understood, and also that reduces borders and makes people approach more easily, because they can interact very naturally virtually because they're used to it. And so we have quite some change in how that influences then business practice, human resource management, and the way of how to design work. I mentioned levels or layers, and here I use the onion model. Onion, if you peel an onion, has many layers, many levels. And that also considers now to some extent this integrative approach. Remember, this functionalist approach considers one nation state as the basis of culture. which is very rigid. However, culture manifests itself at different levels. We have a country, a nation level, such as German culture. Your classmates said German culture, one example of it is drinking beer and wearing certain German traditional clothing, but that's of course only the superficial one. There's all kinds of deep level aspects of it too. That relates to region, because the region he was referring to, Bavaria. Bavaria is known for it. Even nowadays, of course, that's not the common standard, but to some extent. And then I think what is really important nowadays, and also for human resource management, is organizational culture. So companies have their own cultures, and they differ quite substantially. And in some cases, some organizations, they happen to be in Germany, but they're not German companies, because the way they're designed, the way they're organized is not very German. There's maybe some small management consulting company. They're more American. Remember what I told you before, short-term orientation, flexible labor market, performance-based, and so forth. These are sometimes typical characteristics of some consulting companies and banks, even though they might be German, which is not typical German characteristics, because organizational cultures can be very strong or very rigid, and maybe even override national culture. Then we have, it's difficult to read, group culture. I remember I used to work for Allianz, the German insurance company in South Korea, in Seoul. I have a background in business. At Allianz, we have many people with a math background, because they do insurance, actuary, all kinds of statistics. And inside the company, we had two groups. We had the math people, and from my perspective, they made very stupid jokes about numbers. The joke was one equation, blah, 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 equals this, and very funny. I didn't get it. It's a different group. They have their own group dynamics. And I belong to the other group. Or I was a management consultant with an American consulting company. I was a consultant. And the consultants were super proud, super important. And they're a little arrogant, I would say. And then you have the IT people and the admin and the research division and the secretary staff. So different groups, and also how they manifest and how they behave can be very different. And whereas the management consultants are like, we are the super smart people, we are up or out, we are high performance people, confident, super smart and all this. The others didn't believe so, and they had their own way of how to cultivate their culture within one organization, within one nation. So I used to work for an American consulting company in Japan, and the company was completely run in an American way. And even the Japanese who worked for the company, they were not typical Japanese. They were American Japanese. Only their face and they're biologically American, but in terms of values, deep values, everything was very much American, because they were carefully selected into this American company. So here, very important, think of different levels, different layers. We have national, organizational, group culture, and so forth. And in some cases, one of these levels can have a much stronger effect than any of the other levels. And because of that, I think you have to be very careful not to overgeneralize and say, it's this culture because of that nation or because of that company. It can manifest in different ways. Here's just one more example. Probably many of you own Adidas sneakers or some other goods from Adidas. It's a really interesting headquarters because it looks like a sports facilities. You go there, you can see track and field, you can play football, you can play basketball, they have a basketball court, everything. You go there, one of my friends joined Adidas, and when I met him, he's wearing sneakers, jeans, t-shirt, very casual, and he's a manager at Adidas and wearing clothing like you, I would say, and very different vibe, because sports, it's a sports company and that's what they live. And he plays tennis, and he does all kinds of sports, and they also do this, some of them during their break time, and they're all good, and so it's very much sports sports fans. Yeah, many of them work in this company. At the same time, it's still a German company in Bavaria. So they may have some of these Bavarian traits, yeah, but at the same time as they globalize, yeah, they also become more international and less German, yeah, more focusing on this sports spirit. Yeah, also in between there, the CEO, I think from Denmark, different countries, and they're very open, this open global culture, as they acquired many companies in overseas. Yeah, so blending a bit traditional German company, becoming more international, and having a strong corporate culture. Here's some other aspect of culture and how we can distinguish it into tight and loose culture. So what I mean by that is we have on the one side, we have a tight culture. That means the culture that is existing in a country is very strongly enforced. People behave in a very similar way. Anyone who deviates, yeah, is considered an outsider. A typical example would be Japan or Korean. Japan has this thing, oh, Japanese. Or for me in Korea, when I was in Korea, also very tight culture. At the beginning, I was brought up here in Germany, but when I went to Korea, and then I behaved in a Korean way, or I used my chopsticks very well, and they made me compliments. And the compliment was, wow, like a Korean, great, you're really Korean. And like, yeah, is that a compliment? I don't know, yeah, okay. But because you behave all in the same way, and that's expected. You should assimilate into that culture. Everyone should behave in a fairly similar way. You know, in Japan, they also have a saying, the nail that sticks out, if the nail sticks out, needs to be hammered down, because you don't want anyone to stand out. Everyone's same. Also, if you think of Japan or Korea, they have uniforms. Everyone looks the same. Even if they don't need uniforms, they still wear the same clothing. Yeah, so if you apply for a job in Japan or Korea, you all wear like dark suits and white shirts. And they even call it like the job hunting clothing. Or you go all to the clothing store and you say, oh, I need to go for a job talk. You're a university student. Oh, yeah, here, dark suit, white shirt, here you go. And they can offer you this set. So they wear uniforms, or more or less very similar. It's very different here in some other countries. The opposite would be a loose culture, meaning they appreciate individualism. Everyone can be as he or she likes. Sometimes I would say in Germany it's like Berlin. In Berlin also you see people in all kinds of wearing very latest fashion, new trends and so forth, because you show, and they value diversity and differences. It's more accepted, tolerated, or even appreciated to some extent. You can express yourself. Typical examples would be UK, US, and so forth. Cultural distance, cultural similarity, and cultural distance, so cultural differences, to put it in layman terms. So we have, the basic assumption is cultural difference or cultural distance defined as cultures that are very different, have very different cultures, both surface level and deep level. We will soon later talk about how we can define or how we can identify and maybe evaluate certain cultures. But the basic understanding is from research is that cultural distance can lead to all kinds of complications because it's different. You cannot do business as you used to do. You cannot behave in the way as you used to be, or you can, but it may result in some kind of irritations, like who opens that door, and who do you promote, what do you do here and there, and the more distant, the more different, the more complex it can be. At the same time, here we still have some more further basics. So cultural distance needs to be considered in international business, all kinds of business, when doing abroad, entering a different country, doing marketing, doing managing people. The basic idea is the greater the distance, the more difficult it is, or the more efforts you may need to make. Some examples would be cultural distance can affect how quickly immigrants and expatriates adapt to a new environment. Here the example. From Germany to Switzerland, if you move to the German-speaking part, so I studied in St. Gallen, which is German-speaking. You can speak German language. It's very easy. Or you come from Austria and come to Germany, they also speak German language. And that could simplify the processes. At the same time, we can also talk about a paradox. Because the assumption is, it's easy. And to some extent, that's also true. So there's lots of research that shows the closer the culture is, the more easily companies enter a foreign country. And they enter, integrate, and so forth. At the same time, there's some kind of paradox. Because you think Germany and Switzerland are the same. No. Or Austria and Germany are very similar. They are to a certain extent the same. But as we know, particularly from the Swiss and Austrian press and media and business meetings, there's all kinds of conflicts. Because you think, they're very same. Very similar. And yes, they are very similar, but they're not the same. Also in Switzerland, St. Gallen, there was a clear barrier between the Germans and the Swiss. They were in different circles, and they're sometimes quite opposing views. And they didn't mingle or integrate that well, because also of different expectations and so forth. And of course also background. So meaning cultural difference is important, but it can also hinder. Or take the opposite. Here people think, it's the same, but it's not. So you have these expectations, I can do whatever, and they don't. And another example would be maybe China. Germany and China are very similar, very different. Very different, So culture, language, both visible and invisible. The thing is now, whenever you have interactions, it's obvious. Everyone knows it's different. No one would if you, maybe some of here, the first row of students, you look very German. If you go to China, they would not expect you to speak Chinese language. They would not expect you to know how to eat food properly, how to behave, how to do this and that. So you will get a lot of credit, or you can do things and get away easily because they have certain tolerance, because it's so different. And that can also simplify sometimes business. And if you do all kinds of mistakes, they will think, he or she didn't know better.